A second tent appeared beside theirs overnight, even though no one had joined the trip. Eli saw it first because he woke cold. Not the ordinary cold that seeped through sleeping bags before dawn, but a sharper absence of warmth, as if something nearby had displaced it. He lay still, listening. The forest was silent in a way that felt arranged. No insects ticking, no wind combing the branches. His breath sounded too loud inside the tent, a slow rasp that fogged the nylon ceiling and vanished. He unzipped the flap an inch. Moonlight washed the clearing in dull silver. Their tent stood where it always had, staked between two pines. The fire pit lay beyond, ringed with stones and ash. And to the left, close enough that the guy lines nearly touched, stood another tent. Same model, same faded green, same scuffed rainfly. For a moment, Eli assumed exhaustion had misaligned his memory. He widened the zipper, cold air spilling in, biting his cheeks. The second tent remained. His door faced theirs. The fabric was taut, neatly pitched, stakes driven straight down. Frost silvered its seams. Eli's pulse began to climb. "John," he whispered. Then louder, "John." The sleeping bag rustled behind him. John groaned, then stilled when Eli didn't stop shaking his shoulder. "What?" John muttered. Eli pointed. John leaned forward, squinting. His breath caught, not sharply, but in a way that told Eli the sight had landed. That wasn't there. Mara woke next, then Claire. They crowded the tent opening, shoulders brushing, sharing warmth they hadn't realized they were hoarding. No one spoke for a few seconds. The forest waited. "We would have heard someone," Claire said finally. "Right?" "No footsteps," Mara added. "No lights." Eli pushed the flap open and stepped out. Frost crunched under his boots, loud and final. The air smelled metallic, winter-thin. He approached the second tent slowly, every sense stretched tight. Up close, it was unmistakable. Identical wear on the zipper pulls, a small tear in the rainfly near the top seam. Same place as theirs. "Is this a joke?" John asked, though his voice didn't carry humor. Eli crouched and touched the fabric. It was cold, solid. He pressed harder. The wall gave slightly, as if something inside shifted away from the pressure. He yanked his hand back. "Someone's in there," Mara whispered. They listened. Nothing. No breathing. No movement. Just the quiet and the soft tick of frost melting where Eli's glove had warmed the nylon. They didn't open it. Not then. They stood in a loose half-circle, shivering, eyes flicking to the tree line. The forest remained politely distant, trunks upright and still, shadows pooled neatly at their bases. "It's probably ours," John said after a while. "We set up too?" "No," Claire said. "We packed one." Eli knew she was right. He knew because he remembered the argument over weight, the decision to leave the spare behind. The memory felt sharp, anchored, unlike everything else this morning. They ate in silence, hands numb around metal mugs. Steam rose and vanished. The second tent loomed at the edge of their vision, close enough to feel like an intrusion, too close to ignore. When the sun finally crept up, it didn't help. The tent looked more real in daylight, not less. The seams cast crisp shadows. Its stakes bit deep into the ground, as if they'd been there longer than a night. "Let's pack," Mara said. "Now." They moved quickly, fabric snapping, buckles clacking too loudly. Eli kept glancing back. He had the unsettling sense that the second tent was doing the same, watching them, learning the rhythm of their movements. As they shouldered their packs, Eli noticed something else. The ground between the two tents was scuffed with footprints. Not leading in, not leading out, just a churned patch of frost and dirt, as if someone had stood there for a long time, shifting their weight, never committing to a step. They left without dismantling the second tent. The trail out felt longer than it should have. Trees pressed closer, their bark dark and ridged, branches knitting overhead. Every few minutes, Eli turned, expecting to see green fabric between the trunks. First, there was nothing. Then, after a bend in the trail, he saw it. The tent stood again, pitched neatly in a small clearing just off the path. Same orientation, same frost-silvered seams. "We're not walking in circles," John said. "Too quickly?" "No," Mara said. "It's moving." They didn't approach this time. They walked faster, breath tearing out of them in white plumes. The forest stayed quiet, absorbing their panic without comment. The tent appeared again before noon. And again. Always ahead. Always just off to the side. Sometimes closer, sometimes farther. Never directly in their path, but close enough to suggest it could be. By afternoon, Eli noticed details changing. The zipper on the second tent was no longer fully closed. Just an inch open, the dark inside a thin, watching line. Later, a guy line hung loose, brushing the ground like a lazy finger. Claire refused to look anymore. She walked with her eyes fixed on the trail, jaw tight, breathing shallow. Mara whispered counts under her breath. Steps, minutes, anything to anchor herself. John said nothing at all. When the light began to thin, they realized they weren't making progress. The trail markers stopped appearing. The forest deepened, shadows stretching, sound flattening. They had no choice but to stop. The second tent was already there when they chose the clearing. This time it was closer than ever, so close that its shadow touched theirs. The flap hung open halfway now, fabric stirring though the air was still. "No," Claire said softly. "No." They set their tent anyway. Hands shook, knots slipped. Darkness pooled fast between the trees. Night fell without ceremony. They huddled inside, for shapes breathing the same stale air. Outside, the second tent loomed, unseen but present, its closeness a pressure against the walls. Something shifted. Not footsteps, not fabric, just a subtle redistribution of weight, as if someone had settled in more comfortably. Eli squeezed his eyes shut. The sound came again, nearer now, a quiet drag like fingertips brushing nylon. From outside, a zipper moved. Slowly, carefully. They didn't scream. They didn't speak. They listened, frozen, as the sound stopped just before completion. Paused at the exact moment where it would have revealed whatever was inside. The forest held its breath. Eli realized then, with a cold certainty, that the second tent hadn't followed them by accident. It hadn't been placed. It had been waiting for them to stop. They kept spotting the same figure standing between the trees, always a little closer each time. At first, Mara thought it was a trick of contrast, dark bark against darker shadow, her eyes assembling meaning where there was none. Late autumn did that. The forest had thinned just enough to make distances deceptive, branches bare and skeletal, the ground crusted with frost that reflected moonlight unevenly. She stopped mid-step. Between two pines, far back from the trail, something stood upright. Not a tree, not quite a person either, just a vertical interruption where there shouldn't have been one. It was darker than the trunks around it, its outline blurred by shadow. Mara blinked once, then again. The shape remained. "Do you see that?" she asked quietly. Evan turned, breath puffing white. "See what?" She pointed. He followed her gesture, squinting. The silence felt deliberate, pressed flat over the woods. No wind, no birds, just the faint creak of trees settling in the cold. "I don't see anything," Evan said. When Mara looked back, the space between the trees was empty. She told herself it was fatigue. They'd been hiking since mid-afternoon, chasing the last usable light, the forest growing unfamiliar as dusk crept in. Her shoulders ached beneath her pack. Her breath came faster than it should have, rasping slightly in the cold. They walked on. The second time she saw it, she didn't say anything. They were setting up camp in a shallow clearing, their headlamps casting narrow cones of light that sliced the dark into manageable pieces. Evan hammered stakes into the frozen ground while Jonah unpacked the stove, fabric whispering with each movement. Mara straightened and scanned the tree line. The figure stood there again. Closer this time. Not close enough to make out details, no face, no limbs she could be certain of, but near enough that she felt its presence rather than simply saw it. It occupied space differently than the trees, absorbing the weak light instead of reflecting it. Her skin prickled. She watched without blinking. The figure did not move. It didn't sway with the branches or shift with the shadows. It simply stood, patient and exact. "Mara," Jonah said. "You okay?" She tore her gaze away. "Yeah. Thought I saw nothing." When she looked back, the space was empty once more. That night, sleep came in thin, broken pieces. The cold pressed in from all sides, seeping through sleeping bags and ground pad alike. Mara lay awake listening to the forest breathe. Slow creaks, distant settling pops, the soft hiss of her own exhale. She dreamed of standing still while something measured the distance between them, step by careful step. In the morning, frost coated everything in dull white. Evan cursed softly as he flexed numb fingers. Jonah stamped his feet, breath steaming. Mara said nothing about the figure. She told herself that daylight would fix things, that night shapes couldn't survive the morning. By mid-morning, she knew she was wrong. They were back on the trail, following a shallow ridge when she saw it again. Standing just off to the right, half hidden behind a birch with pale, peeling bark. This time, Evan saw it too. He stopped abruptly. "What the hell is that?" Jonah turned. "What?" "Between the trees," Evan said. His voice was tight, controlled. Jonah frowned, squinting. "I don't." The figure was gone. Jonah let out a breath that might have been a laugh. "Jesus, you scared me." Evan didn't respond right away. His eyes stayed on the space where the figure had been, his jaw set. "It was there," he said finally. "I know it was." Mara's stomach twisted, not with fear exactly, but with a colder recognition. She hadn't imagined it, and now it wasn't just hers. They walked faster. The forest felt different now. Not hostile, not yet, but attentive. Sounds seemed to fall short, swallowed before they could echo. The trees stood too straight, too evenly spaced, their bare branches knitting together overhead in a way that made the sky feel distant and thin. They spotted the figure again before noon, then again, always at the edge of vision, always when they stopped moving, and always closer. By the fifth sighting, Mara could tell it wasn't random. The distance shortened in increments that felt measured, deliberate. Not rushing, not testing, learning. It never appeared while they were walking, only when they paused, when they stood still long enough for the forest to settle around them. Jonah noticed the pattern too. "It doesn't follow," he whispered once. "It waits." That was worse. They argued in low voices about turning back, about changing direction, about whether it was even safe to keep moving. Every option felt wrong. Staying felt worse. When the light began to thin again, panic crept in around the edges of their restraint. The figure appeared at the tree line just as they chose a campsite. This time it was unmistakably closer than any before. It stood where the shadows were deepest, moonlight edging its outline. Still no details, just height, stillness, presence. Mara felt an overwhelming urge to look away, and resisted it. She stared. The figure did not advance. It did not retreat. It remained exactly where it was, as if waiting for something specific. For them to notice. They set up camp with shaking hands. The sounds of fabric and metal seemed obscenely loud. No one suggested moving on. When darkness fully settled, the figure disappeared from sight, but not from awareness. Mara could feel it just beyond the reach of the firelight, occupying a precise point in the forest. She didn't sleep. Sometime deep in the night, she became aware of a change. Not a sound, not movement, just proximity. She held her breath and listened. The forest was silent. Too silent. Mara slowly unzipped the tent just enough to see out. Moonlight washed the clearing in pale blue. Their packs lay where they'd dropped them. Frost glittered faintly on the ground. And at the edge of the clearing, no longer hidden between trees, stood the figure. It was close enough now that Mara could tell it was oriented toward the tent. Not facing it exactly, but angled, as if adjusting its position based on where the sounds had come from. Based on them, she watched, frozen, as it shifted its weight. Not stepping forward, not retreating, but settling, like something that had finally found the right distance. Mara understood then that it wasn't approaching. It was calibrating. She zipped the tent shut without a sound and lay back, heart hammering, breath shallow and controlled. Outside, the forest remained still, and whatever stood there did not move again because it no longer needed to.